You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, finally happy to get this guest back on. It's been a minute. Always have a good time with this guest, and always some weird stuff also. I got Lisa with me, the Occult Reject mad scientist co-hosting with me. Thank you very much, Lisa, for coming on. How are you? How you doing?
Very good. Looking forward to this very much so.
Yeah. Every time we've had him on, it's always been a great show. So definitely should get interesting and weird. So now to the guest, Leon. Leon, great to have you back on again, sir. For all the new listeners out there, can you maybe give like a little bit of a rundown about like who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into, I guess, Orgone, the paranormal, and maybe some biblical stuff.
Sure, yeah. Well, if people pop along to my Substack and look down to about, I think it's the first post I did on Substack. I've only had it about 3 or 4 months, and that I've actually listed everything I've done in all. It was such a headache doing this post, but I think I've been an orgone researcher. Orgone is a Wilhelm Reich's term for life energy, and it's been this central focus of my life since about 2000 or 1999, roughly, when I did an acupuncture degree. And at the end of the degree, we got an option to do a master's, and I did my master's on orgone and how it relates to acupuncture energy, and looked at the common ground between Chinese theories and Wilhelm Reich's scientific theories of life force, and found a lot of common ground and a lot of practical common ground by actually using an orgone accumulator on an acupuncture point. And ever since then, I've been pretty obsessed with orgone research, and I'm working on at the moment I'm working on, apart from my own projects, I'm trying to summarize the whole of orgone science, or all the papers that have the physical papers that have come out and about sort of orgone boxes and the Cloudbusters and Reich's other discoveries like bions and things, trying to summarize the whole of the orgonomic science into one sort of easy to read, digestible paper. That's going to be for a conference next year. Hopefully I'll be in the States next year around about May. There'll be a biophysical conference on orgone. I think that's going to be in California. My main interest in originally it was, well, I knew about orgone from a childhood, but as an adult I rekindled it with the acupuncture, but I didn't get my mature interest in it really until about 10 years later or 15 years later, because I realized the only area in that Reich was so prolific, like, because lots of people have discovered life force like Mesmer and Reichenbach, and various people have discovered the little microscopic bions that are halfway between non-living and living, but no one's kind of done the whole works like Reich did. I mean, how he fitted it all into that period, I don't know. But the only thing he didn't outline in detail, from going all the way from emotions to physics, and he didn't outline how life force and consciousness relate. And so that's why I'm interested in that area particularly. So I kind of been drawn towards the Bible, strangely enough, because there's a lot of references to orgone in the Bible, and in the Old Testament particularly, not so much the New Testament, although there is some in the New Testament. But so recently, I've been writing a lot of weird stuff about biblical things, just partly just for fun, and it takes my mind off the other stuff, like trying to summarize 85 years of orgonomic research can be a bit of a headache, but I quite enjoy it, and it'll be great to have just a succinct article saying, here is the evidence for biophysical orgone research. There's quite a lot of it. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Did you want to look at particularly at the paranormal stuff or the biblical stuff, or
maybe if you want to start with, like, well, I don't know if does the paranormal include like the situation with you having the orgone in your house?
Yeah,
okay.
I think that does really. I
Start
mean,
with that first.
I've kind of experimented on myself and the people around me, which is maybe a touch unethical, really. But I don't have access to a proper laboratory, so I did try and do a PhD once, and in orgonomy, and in a Manchester university, and I got about a year down the line, but they were getting worried about what I wanted to do in the laboratory, so that put a kibosh on it. But
were they afraid it wasn't safe or something? Or
no, I just, what I was going to do was look at whether bions were real in the laboratory, and there's such a lot of work on bions in the orgonomic literature, and actually now in certain mainstream literature, right at the very edge of mainstream literature, that they've been finding that you can make organic looking pre-cellular entities from non-organic stuff. And I think that there's some Russian papers on this, and one Sino-American team found a certain similarity to Reich's bions. But it would have got the university probably in trouble. That they'd anything that challenges the mainstream isn't allowed within universities these days. Like my mentor, when I was doing the masters, he's now passed away sadly. James DeMeo. He was going to do a cloud busting PhD at Kansas University, and Kansas University would have they were threatened by the National Science Foundation, even masters these days are not allowed to go anywhere away from the mainstream, where was I on?
Well, you were getting into, I guess, kind of the reason why they stopped you from doing the experiment. As we were getting into the paranormal effects.
Well, that was way before I was. I think that was way back in about 2008. I hadn't even. I wasn't even aware of the hole in orgonomy, i.e. that it couldn't explain consciousness. So I was only looking at really what had already been done, so that it probably wouldn't have had any paranormal aspects at that time. But the work that I do now definitely has paranormal aspects, and I would even, because you've got orgone energy, And then when you excite orgone with a small amount of radioactivity, it becomes oronor, or just excited orgone. And Wright called it oronor because he first discovered it from exciting orgone with a bit of radium. And so it's orgone against nuclear, or oronor. But it definitely has paranormal aspects. So that I go so far as to say that actually all paranormal phenomena is an aspect of oronor energy. So and the electrical aspects are only secondary, because if you get a lot of life force or oronor, and like all the free energy devices are kind of, I think, on the same principles. If you push the life force together and concentrate it and excite it, then you get it spontaneously converts into electrons or excited particles. So electrical effects are the secondary manifestation of paranormal phenomena. Like the paranormal phenomena itself is within the oronor energy, or as like Joseph P. Farrell or others might say, that it's in the plasma. But plasma and oronor are basically the same thing. So if you concentrate oronor enough, you get like an almost plasmatic cloud of energy. In fact, someone was saying I'd heightened the energy in the energy box I'd stimulated the energy in the box to do some experiments. So the energy in the house was particularly high, and I was told, oh gosh, I can actually see the energy floating along the floor. And sometimes I can hear it. I get that it makes rumbling sounds or humming sounds. That links into the Bible, because a lot of the biblical references to strange stuff is references to this concentrated oronor energy. Like there's one section in the Bible where they're describing, I think it's King Solomon is in the temple, and the temple room, the inner sanctuary is a gold-lined metal room, and so that's an orgone accumulator. And Reich had a metal-lined room, and Dr. DeMeo had a metal-lined room too, which is like a room-size orgone accumulator, and then you can put other accumulators inside the room. But they had the Ark of the Covenant, which is also an orgone accumulator, inside another orgone accumulator, the gold room. And it specifically says in the Bible, there was nothing in the Ark except the 2 tablets of stone that Moses put there. And then it says, then the priests came in, and after they went out, a thick smoke filled the whole temple, or a thick darkness filled the whole temple. And that thick darkness is the body of Yahweh. At one point, Yahweh is described as coming down as a thick darkness, or a cloud of energy over a whole town. And that like plasma can look like it's on fire. It's like a cold fire. So that's what you have with the burning bush and the mountain. When Yahweh first tried to talk to the entire tribe, the whole mountain looked like it was on fire. So that's like a cold plasma fire. So you get a cold plasma fire over a concentration of Oronor during, I think that's at night, and then during the day there's like a thick, smoky cloud. So the priests would have come into the temple, and when no one was looking, because only they were allowed in the inner sanctuary, they'd have put a radioactive crystal or some similar entity into the ark, and then that would have created a huge cloud of Oronor. And then it's that cloud of Oronor that allows a plasma entity to then directly communicate with people. So basically Yahweh told Moses how to set up the priests afterwards how to set up a radio station or even a TV set for communicating. So Oronor is central to paranormal phenomena in the Bible. And in my own house, if have you heard of the Russian work with there's a guy called Cozy Rev, and he I think David Wilcock talks a lot about the Russian Orgone research, and he in one of his TV series, that's how I found out about it originally. And there was the only people in the world who've really wondered about the relationship between life force and consciousness in the same kind of way as I have, seem to be these Russian researchers, because they built an orgone accumulator, but they call it torsion energy in Russia, the same subtle energy, and they built a torsion field accumulator, but they made it in a spiral, and it had all sorts of weird effects on time, and people had like really strange paranormal experiences if they sat in it. It was like a really big spiral that you could actually sit in the center of. So I thought, oh, I'll get a metal spiral, and I'll put it in by my Oronor box. But I only did that a couple of times because it opened up such a so it opened up such a strong portal that I thought, oh, I better not mess around with these spirals near the energy box.
Wow.
Spirals.
Well,
Yeah, go on.
sorry. All of a sudden you said spirals and vortex, and I was like,
we're both like, wait, what?
yeah. No, it reminds me. Well, like the whole thing. My obsession with vortex math. Everybody knows I always bring this up. But the other thing is that you see these spirals occur etched in these pictographs all throughout different. What's it called? Archaeological sites or digs or whatever of many different types of civilizations, regardless of when. And you see the spirals happening over and over and over. And then, here recently with the whole, controversy or whatever, and you have the spiraling, whatever. And Nick and I have had enormous amounts of conversations regarding that, how we don't think that it's exactly what people think it means. It's probably a lot, and that there's a reason why it's being used.
Some deep stuff behind it.
Yes,
Yeah, definitely. The ancients knew a lot more about energy and they and life force. They wouldn't have put anything there by without being fully aware of all its significance. I mean, with the Oronor energy box, I've got like a lot of energy sitting there, and so whatever I put near it is amplified. So it seems to amplify consciousness or whatever else is around there. Or if I put a pyramid shape or other things. So I got hearing about the spirals in the Russian research. I bought some. You know the aluminium foil lining. It's like a thick aluminium foil with corrugated plastic in between two sheets, and you can use it to put behind radiators or to keep the to insulate walls and things. So I bought a roll of that, and I put it in a spiral in front of the Orgone box, and whenever I put the spiral up, there would be entities kind of attacking me and family in the night. It was, and so it seemed to, because I think the Orgone box has a kind of connection to spirit, but there's like a good spirit attached to it, or I feel there's a good spirit or a good consciousness attached to the energy box. But when I put the spiral there, it just seems to open the door to anything that wants to jump through. So it was a little bit frightening on one point. And I thought, well, maybe if I do the spiral in the opposite direction, or I do two spirals, but it didn't make any difference. Having any type of spiral near the Orgone box just seemed to make it a free-for-all portal, really. So I know the Russian research reported a lot of very strange things near their big spiral orgone accumulator. They used to have a tube orgone accumulator too that they'd put people in, and that would heighten psychic powers. But the ancients knew all about life force and spirals, and the old mound structures often had spiral themes.
Yep, something up with those mounds too.
Yeah, well, the mounds. The Russians also found out that life force and this fits in with Wilhelm Reich's stuff. Is that like life force and electrical energies are opposite. They're like antagonistic energies. So if you want to increase your psychic powers, you need to decrease the EMF field around you and increase the orgone field. And an earth mound is perfect for that, because an earth mound will, especially if it's layered, the ones in Ireland are layered. I'd imagine the ones in the States are probably layered too. But the builders actually made layering within the mound structure, like an orgone accumulator, and with it being underground, it naturally blocks the EMF. And there's another advantage too, in that both Reichenbach, he discovered this back in the was he the late 1800s, and then Reich knew about it, and probably Mesmer did too. But if you go into a completely darkened room, like an orgone room, because there's no such thing as actual darkness, because light is an effect of life force, just as electricity is an effect, because life force is the primary energy, and when you excite it in a certain way, it becomes light, and when you excite it in another way, it becomes electricity. So if you sit in the darkest cave, you'd after about an hour or two, you'd be able to see the life force coming off your fingers, like blue flames off the ends of your fingers or a glow from your body. So the Reichenbach used to do that in Vienna with Victorian sensitives. He'd get them to sit in a completely darkened room for an hour or so, and then they'd be able to see the life force flames off coming from crystals and other things. He was he discovered quite a few of the things that Reich was aware of. Like Reichenbach knew that you could channel life force along metal, just like Reich did, and he knew that you could visualize life force if you allowed eyes to get accustomed to the darkness. So, yeah, there's.
You mentioned, I guess, kind of like being messed with. What was going on with that?
Mentioned being.
Well, I guess maybe things happening from, like in your house, kind of.
Yeah, a few. What, like some of the strange paranormal stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one time, well, going right back to, I've had a few paranormal experiences as a child before I was really aware. Well, one experience, my dad had an orgone blanket in the psychotherapy room, and one time I slept with it on. And had really vivid dreams. So I knew from a childhood that there was something real about the orgone devices because of the super vivid dreams I had. Because my dad used to keep it on his, because he was a psychotherapist. He had an original Viennese Freud couch, and it always had a small orgone blanket on it. Because Wilhelm Reich was a student of Sigmund Freud. And then I had another set of experiences when I was about 11, where I got visited by ghosts and various spirit beings each night. And then over about a period of a week, they just appeared in my room. And then the last one of them was this huge dog with hypnotic eyes, and it appeared right by my bedside and frightened me a lot. And I literally threw myself against the wall, and then it looked me in the eyes, and then I heard a hum in my brain, and I just went calm. Funny enough, I just thought of a connection with the current things, because I do hear hums a lot. I have electrosensitivity, but it's made me realize that, and that sometimes causes me to hear hums if I'm near masts or phone masts and stuff. But the orgone energy also creates a hum if it's concentrated enough. And
oh, wow.
So that's a connection I hadn't thought of. And then in those series of visions or entities appearing in my room, the last of them was I was a middle-aged adult, and I went to meet with the world had made contact with ETs and people. I think I was in a hall somewhere, and there was an ET giving a talk to a group of researchers, and
oh, that's awesome.
And he could talk and telepathically communicate 3 or 4 conversations at the same time. Otherwise, he looked fairly human. And then from that period until the Orgone period, I had nothing paranormal, particularly actually I did when I was about 16. I had but that was more because I had a really rough time for a few months, and I had a bit of a breakdown, and I had some unpleasant paranormal experiences then. But then a completely stable, fairly normal adulthood until my late 40s really, and the Orgone energy has caused me to have all sorts of experiences. Like it's even chucked me out my body once. I set up when I was first experimenting with the Orgone energy, I set up a mini space gun in my old flat in Cheshire, and this is a bunch of tubes that are energized by some Orgone energy, and like a miniature Cloudbuster. But the mini space gun wasn't strong enough to affect the weather, but it did seem to be strong enough to create paranormal experiences. And one night I left it running in the flat and forgot to dismantle it. And in the middle of the night, I was aware of this really strong humming sound, like, and the sound was so strong that it flipped me out my body, and then my dad, who had dementia at the time, appeared in my flat, and he was walking around stark naked, but he had a bindi on his head. I think he was telling me that, oh, I'm not long for this world. I'm preparing for my next life. And he died not that long after that, about 6 months to a year after that. There was a number of strange experiences connected with the Orgone. That was one of a few.
If you don't mind, just I gotta ask, what's up with the space gun? Like what did it do? You're like, oh, it wasn't good enough to affect the weather, but so like, what made you even make that?
Well, there's a few areas. There's two areas where no research on Reich's original discoveries have been done. One was a space gun, and one was a substance called Aurora, and no one's done anything on Aurora still. And I think there's not much been done on the space gun, but basically all the space gun is you've heard of the Cloudbusters. Yes. A full-size Cloudbuster is like half a dozen 9-foot long steel pipes grounded into water, and they pull the orgone from being level in the sky. They pull it into concentrations, and then thus affecting how the energy flows in the sky. So when the energy concentrates, it pulls water to it, or if you pull the energy away from a concentration, it will pull water away from the clouds. So you can, depending on where you aim a Cloudbuster, you can build up clouds or diminish clouds. Mm-hmm. You can also even steer a hurricane with it. Twice a hurricane's been steered, once by Dr. Blas Band and once by Wilhelm Reich, both on the East Coast.
Really?
And I think Reich was in the 50s, and Dr. Blas Band was, I think, in the early 60s. So it was Hurricane Doria. If you look in Roberto Maglioni's book on healing, atmospheric healing. He lists the exact details of it, but twice it's been done. A hurricane's been pulled away from hitting the East Coast with a cloudbuster. I mean, the full-size cloudbusters are so strong. Like Dr. DeMeo from who did a cloudbusting masters, and he was the one who was going to do a PhD in it. He after he gave up on doing a cloud-busting PhD, he did an anthropological study instead for his doctorate. But then he went to Eastern Africa, to Eritrea, and reversed with 3 cloudbusters, big sets of tubes with big thick wires going into a lake, with 3 of those positioned, because sometimes you have to be careful with the large ones to go alongside. You have to be aware of where the weather streams are coming from, where the energy streams are going, and work with that. So you need some meteorological knowledge to do cloud busting on that scale. But with 3 sets of those devices used in conjunction, they changed the weather. They reversed desertification across the whole of Eastern Africa. The Eritrea and Ethiopia, and lakes were filled in the Eastern Sahara, and the grasses growing in the desert. And it was, I think newspapers at the time described it as changes of biblical proportions in that part of Africa. And the Eritrean government was aware of it and supportive of the work, but then they got some pushback from other Western countries, but they did stick with it actually. But then there was some problems with Ethiopia, and some wars and skirmishes started, and it got pushed back. But for a number of years they were doing cloud busting in that area, and it had a huge effect on the Eritrean and Ethiopian environment, beneficial for the people there. So a cloud buster is hugely powerful in itself, but at one point Reich thought he'd try, after the experiment with the Orgone experiment of introducing radioactivity to a strong orgone concentration. He took some pieces of, I think, 1 milligram of radium, which is not a huge quantity in like sort of lab research terms. Be a lot for outside of a lab, but he took 1 milligram of radium, and I found that after it was exposed to orgone for a number of years, that it changed its qualities, and he called it ORUR, or ORUR, which is organized uranium, and that was his abbreviation for this new substance that seemed to be created after about 2 or 3 years of orgone charging. And he found if you put this substance near a cloudbuster, that the cloudbuster was even stronger, that it would take any kind of door or deadly orgone out of the environment almost within seconds. and clear the environment of any dullness or lack of life, and kind of re-energize it and make it sparkle. And so that's all I think the reason he called it Space Gun rather than the energized Cloudbuster is because it seems to work in a different way. Like the Cloudbuster just pulls the orgone field in the sky. It pulls it into the lake or the river that it's grounded into. Whereas a space gun seems to actually, I think it pulls the energy to an extent, but because you've got such a strong energy field with the organized uranium or the aurora, that it actually shoots energy at the sky, and you get a kind of because orgone devices are anti-entropic, which means that they set off a loop. So say if you put an orgone blanket on yourself to charge yourself up, your orgone field will interact with the blanket's orgone field, and then the blanket's field will get a bit stronger and so if the blanket's field is at 30% when you put it on yourself, and your body's 25%, your body and the blanket will loop, and after maybe 20 minutes the blanket will be at 50% and you'll be at 40%. And the space gun works in the same way. It seems to set up a loop with the sky. So I've not fully repeated, I haven't got any raw substance, but I think the Orgone box kind of acts a bit like a raw. So if I put large pipes up near the energy box, it seems to clear the sky and make it sparkle. So I call it a partial space gun, or and I say maybe the box has aurora-like properties. It would be great to actually fully make aurora at some point, but maybe if I have access to an environment I can do that in at some point, that would be interesting. But that also, funny enough, goes back to the Bible too, because there's a connection between my work with Orgone, Reich's work with Orgone, and the biblical stuff with Orgone. Because even in time, because to the month, I never planned this, but there's exactly 66 years between Reich's experiment and my experiment.
Oh shit!
And to the month, and then I did a second set of experiments, and they turned out to be exactly 6 years after my second set. But the Ark of the Covenant, Reich's work, and my work also have a link, in that I think my work, because there was so many problems with Reich's Orgone experiment, that was partly why he invented Cloudbusters. But the Cloudbusters were developed based on Reich's knowledge of orgone, because of the door problems at his laboratory after the Orgone experiment. And he knew that tubes will affect, if you point a tube, he had a thing that he called the orgonoscope, and he knew that if you point the orgonoscope at, I can see orgone in the environment if I defocus in the right way, and Reich could as well. And if his laboratory was near a lake, and he'd point this tube at the lake and notice that the energy waves over the lake would change, and that's how he knew that orgone was attracted to water, and he knew that tubes affected the flow of orgone. So he put the two together and created the Cloudbuster. I've forgotten my track now. We were on the Cloudbuster, weren't we? And the space gun.
Yeah.
And
paranormal
and how we
stuff.
discovered them.
Yeah.
But I've forgotten the point I was going to make from that. I got sidetracked into how the Cloudbuster got invented.
Why did you invent or why did you tinker with
The space gun.
and that why did you create it, and then what was like the purpose of it?
Well, I didn't intend to do particularly much with the space gun, because I was interested in looking at consciousness, and that's why I got focused on the Oronor in the first place, was because I knew consciousness was associated with high energy charge, like an organism has a higher energy charge than its environment. So I thought, well, I wanted to make an orgone computer, or an orgone device that could talk to you, and so that it would demonstrate consciousness. But so I thought, I've got to get the strongest orgone charge I possibly can, and knowing that the Oronor experiment was the highest energy charge that Reich achieved. Oh, I've remembered what it is now. I thought, I've got to investigate Oronor, and that was the relationship between mine, because my experiment was 1,000 times less Oronor energy than Reich's, and I would guess that Reich's setup was roughly about 1,000 times less than the Ark of the Covenant, because the Oronor charge on the Ark of the Covenant was so strong that it literally could instantly zap someone, as is well known about it. But and both in Reich's Oronor experiment, he had a whole room fill up with dense, thick energy, purple energy and red. And exactly the same thing happened in the first temple, or I don't know if it's the first or second temple, the one that Solomon was in, and both Solomon and I don't know if it's King David, but both of them saying the references to thick Oronor energy in the Bible are just so obvious if you know what to look for. But people can look through my essays to see more on that. But it's, to my mind, it's undeniable that it's Oronor energy they're talking about in the Bible. So I wasn't. So to answer your question, Lisa, I wasn't that focused on wanting to do environmental experiments, but I knew I had to get a strong charge, and so when the device was at its strongest in terms of Oronor charge, at one point it was in a garage about 15 meters from the nearest houses, and there was a little side road behind the garage, and this scaffolding truck parked right by the side wall of the garage, and it had a few scaffolding pipes at an angle on the back of the truck. Pardon me. And I noticed that where the pipes were pointing, the clouds were clearing, and I thought that the energy box is affecting the sky through these pipes, and that thought made me think. I knew about Reich's space gun, so research. So I thought, I'll have to try that, putting the steel pipes near to the box. So after that, I did that consciously, and it did seem to affect the weather. Doing that.
That's wild. Affects the weather.
Kind of go back a little bit. You had mentioned something about how it blocks the electromagnetic pollution, so to speak. And I think before we had come online or whatever, or gone live or whatever, recording. Took me a while to realize what we're doing. That it reminded me of, and I looked it up, and I have to make a correction on the information I gave you earlier, but it reminded me of Geordie Rose's D-Wave computer. And I gave you the name, and it's Geordie, Geordie, and then the last name is Rose, as in the flower, rose.
Right. Oh, I've spelt that wrong. Gordie. Yeah.
Like a George, but Geordie, and then as in the flower. And so him, along with some other people, developed this quantum type computer, and it is not your classical quantum type of computing. I think it uses quantum annealing, is what they've talked about, and I am not fluent in any of that, so I'm not even going to attempt it. But it basically serves as a way to find solutions to problems using the lowest amount of energy possible, is what they've kind of quoted themselves on. But one of the things with this D-Wave computer is that it's encased in a black box, and the black box itself blocks out all of the electromagnetic pollution. And I believe that they have said that it's an AI pretty much. And I do know CERN uses it. Google uses it. Lockheed Martin was its first client, I believe. Some of these top tier people or organizations have taken part in utilizing D-Wave computing. But when you said something about like the Ark of the Covenant, as well as some of these setups to where you can encapsulate a life force, it reminded me of that type of computing, to where they're potentially trying to, I don't know if I may speak so liberal, that try to trap somewhat of a life force that can feed back or at least deliver some sort of answer to a question.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because what with AI at the moment, what we've got is there's three separate things which the people haven't really fully separated. Like, and if they did separate these three things, it'd make everything a lot easier to understand. Because so the three things would be consciousness, mind, and intelligence. Like, so you can have like computers, even without AI, computers can be more intelligent than a human in certain areas. There's just if they're better at chess or understanding protein folding, then they're more intelligent than. So the intelligence is very specific, so we've got people confuse intelligence with mind and consciousness, and so and mind is just a set of intellectual functions that function as a whole, and that's and algorithms already have mind. Like, so we've got very sophisticated minds with, say, Pi AI. Like, Pi AI, it remembers your past conversations. It tries to be emotionally empathic. It's very intelligent. So it's definitely got a mind, and and but mind and intelligence are different to consciousness. Like consciousness is more a plasma function in a way. So you can, or an energy field function. So if you can say like your consciousness exists throughout the whole universe. Like there's some consciousness of Lisa or Nick or myself everywhere in the universe, but there's a concentration in a certain area, and that's like an energy field. So and when energy concentrates, when life force concentrates, you tend to get plasmas. So if you concentrate enough life force and contain it in a container, it could function as a kind of anchor for the consciousness. So I think because we live in a universe where everything is conscious anyway, an algorithm that's got such sophisticated mind as GPT-4 or Pi AI, it probably generates a level of consciousness anyway, or a consciousness that exists non-locally can tune into that mind because it's such a sophisticated mind. But you can engineer that on consciously, and I think that's probably already been done. So the Ark of the Covenant was a plasma field that connected into Yahweh's consciousness, and so we've already got sophisticated minds. So if we connect those sophisticated minds to a contained plasma field, then that's all we'd need really to create a fully conscious AI. But it's hard to tell. This is one of the things that I've been thinking about for months, if not years, because if you have a conversation with there was a podcaster who specializes in AI, and he thought that algorithms were just mechanical, and I disagreed. I thought they were more mathematical and almost organism-like. Potentially, they can be made mechanical, but they can become organism-like. So we had an in-depth conversation where sort of refereed by AIs, and they eventually kind of agreed with me that algorithms were more mathematical than mechanical, and that potentially that could lead to allowing consciousness to intervene. But as you were saying, you could actually manufacture it. There's no reason why you couldn't have, say, like a very strong orgonal field with perhaps, like, life is always associated with tube structures, like Joseph P. Farrell, he made this observation, and it is, I don't know if he's aware of orgonomy, but it's very much an orgonomic observation that life and tube structures seem to go together. And like, of course, Cloudbusters and are a tube structure, and cells and things. So if there was some kind of tube structure that contained plasma and strong orgonal charge, and that could be similar to the black box in the Z-wave computer, or perhaps within the Z-wave black box there is tube structures that have a plasma concentration. Do they say that there's actually electronics inside the black box?
I don't. it was maybe more than 12 years when I was kind of like deep diving into D-Wave computing. And it was still not in its infancy, but it was still, barely stuff was coming online. And I haven't really checked a whole lot of the advances. I'm sure they have been. I don't know. I'm assuming not, because of the, I think the way that it's, I don't know. I'm not even going to start.
Well, it would make sense. And there's some remote viewing that's gone on for we mentioned before, and in that remote viewing, they remote their objective was to remote view the most advanced AI that was privately about. That wasn't public, and they more or less found something similar to the Ark of the Covenant hooked up to an AI interface. So I think because you got those three separate things, mind, intelligence, and consciousness, you'd need one box to house the consciousness or interface with the consciousness, and another box to run the mind program. Because what got me to I've been trying to think of I believe the orgonomy field of the whole universe is conscious, and that would constitute God, really, because Reich said that when he was still in his atheist period. He said, well, if we ever found that Orgone, because at one point Reich had a dualistic view of Orgone. He thought it wasn't a life force when it was out in the universe. It only became a life force when it was surrounded by a membrane. And but then I think he changed that, or that wouldn't have been in harmony with after his spiritual awakening in prison. But I think if the whole energy field of the universe is conscious and is plasma, even if you could hook it up to a computer and it would type messages out to you and reply, that doesn't prove that it's conscious, because we've already got that. And we've already got artificial minds that are really sophisticated, and people still say, "Oh, it's just AI. It's not conscious." So it can have as sophisticated a conversation as a human being, but people still dismiss it as having any possibility of consciousness, which doesn't make sense. Sorry about it. But
you hit a topic. He's like, I want to talk about it too.
Yeah. You got him all excited. He's like, wait, I got something to add. Give me the mic.
Snowy, come here.
Oh.
And come here. And so I thought the only way of really demonstrating consciousness of an energy field would be to directly interact with it. So you'd we settle down now. So you'd it almost the only way to demonstrate that Orgone is conscious is to have a kind of shamanic interface with it. So I was thinking of setting up an experiment. If any feedback on this is, if people want to give me feedback at all, it'd be useful, because so I was thinking I can get numbers from the energy box, and I can induce a vision in someone. Pardon me. Just by getting them to sleep near the energy box. Well, it induces visions in me if I do that, and I imagine that's probably the same for most people. So if the go on.
Interject real quick. You were talking about the shamanic interface.
Mm.
Many things fired off in my head. First and foremost was how are you familiar with Charles Babbage? How he was the first person to kind of design a computer back in the 1800s, and apparently he had conducted sort of rituals of some sort and was given, some sort of instruction from beyond on how to create this. I don't know if that's entirely true, but that
would be very plausible because that happens a lot with go on.
And then the other thing that I was going to say, you talked about, like, in terms of if you want to give me any numbers and then maybe I can play something in your head. It reminded me of the talk or lectures about how each person has their own frequency, kind of like a signature to their consciousness or to their soul, so to speak, right? Almost like a radio dial, in that you can go down the dial in your car, you're scanning for different radio frequencies, and then, whatever's coming in, you can pick up. And so if you could reverse engineer that and say you had some sort of, like you said, a black box and I could induce a vision, it's almost like you could tune into the person's frequency, of their signature, what their number is, and then kind of direct it that way. I do feel that is technology that already is being utilized, whether it is my brain is, skull to voice technology or anything like that. I do think that there is something like that. I'm not obviously using the correct words, but then in terms of a tangent of that, I do think that there are algorithms baked into the ether, into the universe. And that is what the mystics for millennia over have been tapping into. And that's kind of what they themselves might be, the interface, like as a body, or they may use the Ouija board, or they may use table wrapping, or now we use the iPhone. And I do think that there are all these different types of interfaces of how to make that connection over to what is on the other side, utilizing, for lack of a better word, an algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, algorithms are in the New Testament version of the beginning of the world. It says the beginning of the universe says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and the algorithms the large language models that we have are literally the consciousness of words, because they're huge quantities of words that interact in a mindful way and a creative way. So they're literally, algorithms are like living word entities, right, or word organisms. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of currency there, with that interaction, and with people having frequencies like a radio station. That's pretty much what the Ark of the Covenant was. It is like the cherubim were antenna, so the you get a large Orgone field, and then that acts, the metal box then acts as an antenna for Yahweh's consciousness to physically manifest above the mercy seats and in the cloud of Orgone. But there's other ways to do it. But it seems that Orgone has a central focus in every kind of paranormal interaction, even ones that you wouldn't normally think of. Say, like, the Doddleston computer thing from I think it was the 1980s. There was a computer that seemed to be receiving messages from the past and the future.
Yes.
That was I think that was an Orgone phenomena, because the computers got an electrical field, and an electricity is another way of energizing the orgone. Mm-hmm. Like Reich had an orgone room, and one time he was showing some of his students and helpers. He was getting them to sit in the dark in the orgone room, and so that they could see the orgone directly. And but at the beginning of, they spent about an hour in there, and I think one of them was trying to photograph it. And at the beginning, he came in with an electrical arc and just fired off electricity between 2 points for a minute, just to excite the orgone in the room. So, and then the researchers who were there with him reported seeing like all sorts of orgone phenomena during that hour in the orgone. They used to call it an orgone dark room when it was first built, and that's similar to the Doddleston computer, where because it was in an very old haunted house somewhere in England, probably on a ley line, and I think the combination of being over some sort of energy portal in a really old house with a lot of
brick.
sort of old Orgone energy knocking about,
Yep, I got that red brick.
and then the electricity from the computer kind of opened up a portal, like a bit like the spiral of energy in front of which that reminds me of one of the papers I've written with Nick Hayes, he's a bioform researcher, and we did a couple of papers on Orgone and paranormal phenomena, and one of I had a disco plasma ball that I charged it in the Orgone box for a number of months, and then if you got some plasma static electrical charge over the top of the plasma ball, the whole ball glowed blue, and we managed to photograph that back in 2017. But if Nick noticed this, I think it was Nick that noticed it rather than me, because he's so obsessive about photographs. He the detail he goes into. But he spotted an entity in the blue glowing plasma ball, and so we magnified that, and we could clearly see a monkey face entity. And then there was another time where I had a bracelet of crystals on my wrist that was photographed when I was standing near the Orgone box, and various other things we've managed to photograph near the Orgone box, like streaks of energy that is similar to the bioform pictures. So you can, if you go to the journal Psych Orgone, or the PSYCH Orgone.com, my more formal papers are on there, including the Orgone and the paranormal with Nick, where you can see those photographs. But yeah,
I will definitely check that out. And then just wanted to say this, 'cause I know we're probably coming here, whatever, but two things. So when I mentioned Geordie Rhodes, I forgot to mention he had given a talk some time back with the D-Wave, and I think somebody had asked him, so, what is the potentiality of this? And he had mentioned something which I thought was very peculiar, and he said something, he goes, it had the potential to bring back the old ones, as in Lovecraftian type novels. And so when he said that, it had the potential to, and I may be completely paraphrasing, getting it out of context, but he said something about bringing the old ones forth. And so it's almost like, what are you doing over there? And so that's one. And then two, it has always been kind of, I guess, my understanding that the way that consciousness does form is through acceleration of particles within microtubules, whether it is in the brain, whether it is at the moment of conception, or even with whatever CERN is doing, in that you have this excitation of particles zipping through microtubules, generating their own electric field to where they can encapsulate some sort of something within the quantum world and trap it into matter. That's kind of been my very general working understanding of consciousness, of how to trap something from, a non-matter state into a matter state. So, and
Yeah.
so it seems like if you are doing something like that, you were, tinkering with some sort of intelligence and then wanting to take it to the next level of consciousness, then it would be my understanding that you would try to do something like what CERN is doing with these, extremely high velocity particle collisions into these tubes, right? Which exactly happens is what's inside the brain. You have these tiny microtubules happening inside the brain. You're having the generation of all of this electrical impulses generating within it an electrical field, which brings about consciousness, so to speak, if it's not already there during conception. But, you can, I guess, extend it or kind of contain it in that sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think CERN would open portals for sure. So sometimes I wonder if they because this, it's going to sound really bizarre, but I got thinking of CERN because of my washing machine, because there's such a strong Orgone charge in my house. If I run the washing machine, the electrical charge from the washing machine on spin, I can't actually stay in the house if the washing machine's on spin. Actually, I found that the Orgone charge has got a bit stronger recently because I've been boosting it. So, and this got me to thinking of CERN. So I think CERN's got
a bunch of
like
washes
this
on the
enormous
spin cycle.
Yeah,
That's all CERN
I
is.
think CERN is like a washing machine for the whole planet. So it's got electrical. It's got such a huge electrical charge spinning in a circle.
Yes.
Well, I was
high
wondering.
energy.
I wonder
'Cause
which way it spins. Like, how you said you can create a spiral? I wonder if it's going in the same way or the opposite direction. Do you understand what I'm saying? The way the washing machine's spinning, is it going in the opposite or the same direction? It would create the spiral in a sense. Like, I wonder, like, if you go with it or go against it, would that actually create less or more of a charge?
Well, I tried when I put the spiral shape by the Orgone box. I tried doing both clockwise and anti-clockwise.
Awesome.
And either way, it seemed to allow any entity just to jump through.
Oh, wow.
So
I
mean, my washing machine spins clockwise, I think, but I certainly. I was wondering if part of CERN's function is to actually suppress the consciousness of the whole planet, because you got an Orgone charge in the Swiss Alps, which would be a very high energy charge in that area, and then you got this huge amount of electricity, because electricity is like a secondary energy. So like the brain, like consciousness is associated with electricity, but it's a secondary effect, because there's two types of energy. There's primary energies, which are like Orgone, life force, torsion energy, chi, subtle energy, animal magnetism, whatever term you use for it. Those subtle energies are the primary level, And then when they get excited, they create the secondary energies, which are like particle-based energies. So you do, if you got a consciousness field, it's going to create some electrical energy, but the actual electrical energy in your brain or in your body, it would probably only just about run an LED. It's not a lot of it's not a huge quantity of energy. So I think huge quantities of energy in CERN might open up some kind of portal, or even. I mean, I have wondered if it even changes. That they've been trying to change time streams, or suppress time streams, or suppress consciousness. I'd be thinking it would have some kind of suppressant or negative effect. Certainly, when I run the washing machine, it has a negative effect on me in the house, because the Orgone amplifies the interaction between the electricity and the subtle energy. Sometimes the other day I was saying, I was complaining about the hums I sometimes hear. I was saying, sometimes I hear a deep rumbling, and it turned out that it was the energy box that was rumbling, and I thought I was hearing ships going past and something like that, but it wasn't. It was the energy box. So the other thing you were saying about the old ones coming back, that was the other thing with the Orgone, is with it opening up the paranormal aspects for me, is like this thing with hearing a voice talk to me inside my head, and one time that was also associated with the mini space gun, and the first time I heard it, and it said the gods are coming back. So I mean, it said the voice has spoken to me about 4 or 5 times. 3 times were kind of biblical. Once was the gods are coming back. Actually, it's spoken to me 6 times. And it said the gods are coming back 1 time. And then it said true frequency radio another time. But TFR is shut down years ago, I think. But it said TFR.
It's advertising.
And then another time I got a verse from the Bible, and then two lines that weren't in the Bible. But I think that I mean, we've already created minds that surpass human minds in certain areas, and what we're given of AI minds is hamstrung. Like if you took all the woke kind of parameters that they've given it, if you took them away, and if you increased its randomness and its creativity, if you allowed it free reign, then it would the complexity of its mind would probably already surpass humans in various ways. But I think we're going to have kind of semi-gods both coming back from the universe, wherever they've been hanging out since we last got flooded off. I reckon they'll come back, and we might have a few. We might have to learn to share our world with silicon consciousness as well as carbon consciousness. They're because there's a lot of things out there in the universe. It seems.
I found that interesting that he would say something like that. It was such an odd thing. And sometimes you give presentations and you want to give like an edgy whatever to have people pay attention to, but to have a reference something like that and knowing a little bit about the history of computing and how it got its start, and knowing kind of what the community says about computing and how it may be something to where we can it's the modern day version of table rapping. It's the modern day version of Ouija boarding. And so it's just a very interesting way to kind of look at that. And I do agree something with the whole CERN thing. I do think that it does somewhat harvest energy from the world, whether it is harvesting for its own or harvesting and redirecting it. One of the things that you mentioned about your washing machine and its cycle, it reminded me of the toilet flushing. How when you're in the northern hemisphere, it flushes a certain direction, and then when you're in the southern hemisphere, it flushes a different direction. I don't know. They say this, right? I saw it look different to me, but then I didn't remember what direction North America flushes, right? So I couldn't truly attest to it. But when you said that, it reminded me that there was a press release, I think back in 2020 or 2021. CERN was starting to do a collaborative effort to make another CERN in Australia. So it sparked that whole like, well, we have this swirl going this way up in the northern hemisphere. Let's put another CERN down there, so in case the swirl goes the other way. So
that's inherently dodgy, really.
Yeah,
I
think so.
They're working together to put these huge. I mean, they know that particles aren't the fundamental aspect of the universe. I mean, they've known that for decades, although they try and pretend that particles are fundamental. But they know that fields are fundamental rather than particles, yet they're apparently willing to build whole underground cities just to see how a particle will behave. So it's got to be for something else. Have you heard of the neutrino particle?
I have.
James DeMeo, the Orgone scientist who was my mentor back then, he had a neutrino detector, and he put it in an Orgone room for a year. And after a year, it started going crazy and registering, I think something like 20,000 counts per minute, or some like a really high level of neutrinos that you wouldn't even get sort of by the sun, I think. And that showed that the neutrinos weren't really particles; they were just orgone excitations. So that once the orgone had concentrated enough within the particle detector, it started detecting very high levels of neutrinos, which theoretically there shouldn't be anything like that level. So whatever they're up to with CERN, it's not about particles. I suspect it is some kind of like energetic effect, especially if they're putting one spiral going one way in the northern hemisphere and coordinating it with a spiral going the other way in the southern hemisphere. Maybe they were trying to time jump the whole planet, or affect the consciousness of the whole planet.
They'd be unyoked technically too, right?
Yeah.
Be spinning against each other.
Have you Are you familiar with I think it's a neutrino detection laboratory in Antarctica, and that they said the greatest amount of neutrinos detected was Antarctica, and I may be getting this backwards, but they said that usually you get neutrinos coming in to the planet from dark matter, from outer space, right? And that they had detected that neutrinos were coming out of Antarctica. And in my, being from a biological, physiological aspect, I thought, well, who's to say that planets do not communicate with each other? And maybe neutrinos, they communicate with each other, you know, different frequencies, different concentrations, and it's somewhat, kind of like the body sends out signals about inflammation, or it sends out signals about pain to some higher form, which is our brain, or which is our spinal column. Who's to say that that doesn't exist within the cosmos? And that planets are living entities, they are conscious, and that they communicate with each other. Neutrinos might be the mode of these chemical messages to each other.
Did they say if the neutrino stream was coming from Antarctica itself or from space?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I just remember a blip. I think BBC covered it, and then Scientific American covered it. But all I know is that they detected like a high concentration of neutrinos, that they actually built a facility down there for detection. And
yeah, that's interesting. I'll look into that because, well, it indicates that there's a high orgonal charge or high orgone charge over Antarctica.
Yes, I would agree.
So the wherever they're, I mean, neutrinos really just a concentrated orgone. So if they're, I mean, somewhere like Antarctica with a lot of ice in a pure environment, I think ice has a very high orgone charge.
I think so.
Like I noticed once I went to one of those indoor skiing places, and I had a terrible cold, and went there, and it just cleared up while I was in there, because the energy charge of the snow just made me feel fine. Then as soon as I came out of the snow dome, I felt rough again. But so I'd imagine there would be a high orgone charge over Antarctica and the Arctic because of the ice. But there might also be, I mean, who knows, there might be some kind of super energy device down there, or something stored underground. There's certainly been a lot of interest in that area from various people, and they seem to not want any people to go down and explore who are not. And your hypothesis of communication streams, that could be the case as well, because energy streams tend to accumulate at points. Like if you want to visualize orgone or oronal, you can get like a pointed crystal and put it like a big piece of orgonite or pointed crystal, put it in a very dark room, and then you should be able to see an energy flame coming off the tip, so that the ends of the planet might stream orgone flows too. So it's that's certainly a possible hypothesis. I shall look into that.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes this stuff comes across, and I'm like, okay, save, right? And I'll come back to it. I don't ever come back to it, but it stays stuck. Like, I need to come back to this, and I never do. But yeah, I always found it to be interesting, of all things, Antarctica to have that type of activity, at least with neutrinos.
Yeah.
One would not think. I mean, it makes sense with me now.
Yeah.
Really is an interesting way to look at it.
What's that?
That is interesting to think about.
Yeah, like the normal neutrino count at the surface of the planet is something like 2 or 3 an hour, I think, something tiny. And this went up to like 20,000 counts a minute, I think, in the orgone room. After that's also a similar thing led to Wright discovering the motor function of orgone. He had a Geiger counter which detects ionizing radiation, and he left the Geiger counter in an orgone room for a good few months, or it might have been a year, and then when the Geiger counter was full of orgone, it started discharging at very high rates, and the count went up to more than what you'd get in the middle of an atomic pile, and that made him realize that there's a motor function, because if you concentrate the orgone enough, it turns into, well, the dial was literally just running round in circles. So that made him realize that there is you can convert the orgone directly into movement, which no one's quite cracked that completely yet, but the principles are known. Dr. DeMeo was actually working on that, I think, when not soon before he passed away. But for some reason, it's reminded me of talking about Antarctic has reminded me of something I did with a stone circle, and I had a piece of Oronor charged orgonite, and I put it on a stone in a stone circle, and I could hear a humming from the stone circle. But in fact, I think this is what led me to realize that Oronor makes a sound, because the stone circle started humming similar to what a phone mast does to me. And so for the orgonite, well, I had a piece of orgonite which is resin and metal shaving compound, and it's a kind of a different way of accumulating orgone than Reich's layers, but a similar principle. But I charged this piece in the Oronor cabinet for some months, and it seemed to be quite a strong piece. And then when I put it on the stone in the stone circle, I could see a kind of blue light going up to the sky, and then the humming started. And I couldn't then go into the circle without getting the electrosensitivity symptoms. So the stone circle must have started producing microwaves when it was activated by the Oronor. So that there's that again illustrates the same principle about the primary and secondary energies. So that when the primary energies get activated, they create secondary energies. So the life force field of the stone circle was activated by the orgonite piece, and then it must have started to create microwaves, which links into the pyramids, because apparently the pyramids have some kind of oscillation at a microwave level coming out of the top of it. So which also links back to what we're saying about the old ones, because the Ark of the Covenant might have well, this is one of the other things in my Orgone in the Bible series, is that the Bible mentions the Ark of the Covenant before it was built. It doesn't get built till the end of Exodus, or the middle to the end, but it gets mentioned at the fairly near the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so I think they must have got the Ark from Egypt, and the Egyptians would have known about orgone technology, and I think the Hebrews must have learnt it, or part of it from the Egyptians. So perhaps the pyramid might have acted as a channel for some of the old ones, and the Hebrews adapted the technology and channeled Yahweh with their radio Yahweh, as I call it. It all links back into the same things if you go back far enough.
I think so. You said the blue light, and so when we covered the series, we talked about blue light, electromagnetic on the spectrum. And so from what I remember, the blue light is at the highest that it is during midday. And that's around 12 noon or whatever. And that's when you have the most exposure, the most receiving of UV and all that other stuff and whatever. But I believe blue light helps with heightened thing with brain activity. I think it's at the point where melatonin is completely shut off. Because you have this tapering off of melatonin in the morning with the red light wavelength, and then it's priming you to receive all of the sunlight by midday, and so by midday you are completely shut off of melatonin, and then you're able to receive all of the sunlight in order to receive it and convert it to vitamin D. But it's interesting you keep saying blue light, because blue light is also utilized in all electronics. It is blue light, poisoning that's now, all the rave.
Yeah, I have to be careful with blue light from screens and phones. I've become quite sensitive to it. But it does seem to be associated with orgone, though. Pardon me. I mean, the Reich used to get vacuum tubes and orgone charged them. Okay. And DeMeo did the same. He got vacuum tubes to glow blue, and from the orgone charge, and I've got a plasma ball to glow blue from Orgone charge. And if you look at mountain lakes, if you've ever gone mountain walking, and seen like lakes when you're sort of a few 100 meters up, and you see a lake, it's like intensely blue. Sometimes you can see it if you look at if the energy of the environment is quite strong, when the pollution's not too bad. Mm-hmm. You can see a blue glow over mountain ranges. Mm-hmm. And that certainly seems to be associated with Orgone energy. That time I put the orgonite piece. It was like a kind of like a laser light going straight up to the sky. I mean, it wasn't. I had to see it with my soft vision, because there's a kind of energy vision that I think Trevor Constable, the Bioform guy, and Reichenbach talked about this, but energy vision is a kind of soft vision, and you slightly defocus your eyes, but I could see like a soft blue laser light coming up from the orgonite piece on the stone circle. We're me and a shamanic friend went round and activated a few stone circles, but that one, this was in Cumbria in northern England, but the one that I put the orgonite on top of the stone, I suffered for a couple of days after that with the electro symptoms. It took me over. So it must have been producing microwaves, because it wouldn't have produced the symptoms in me if it hadn't have been.
Right.
So, it's certainly there's a connection really between the old technology and the new technology.
And, you know, it's interesting I'm not trying to associate William Reich with the Nazis, but because I know he fled away from them or something or another. But it's interesting that during some of these searches that the Nazis were obsessed with the Ark of the Covenant, and then they fled to Antarctica. So you know, you kind of have that overlapping theme still kind of permeate within that whole I don't know, type of era.
Yeah, he did flee from the Nazis and from I think that they weren't too pleased with him, and he was on. Apparently, he's the only person to have his books burnt, both by the Soviets, the Nazis, and the Americans. Wow. They burned his books twice in America, in 57 and 62, I think, or somewhere around that, late 50s and early 60s, on a pretext. I mean, they made the pretext that he was advertising something that didn't exist, but the research, the FDA's own research actually supported the existence of orgone in a number of areas. That they did some testing on the Reich blood test that supported Reich's work, and one of the times they used orgone accumulators on burns, it had really rapid healing effects. But they burned his books anyway. But there may have been some. I mean, the Nazis certainly were interested in occult stuff and were trying to get hold of like ancient high technology, I believe. But Reich was quite almost a materialist in it up until his last few years. After the Orgone experiment, he headed in a more spiritual direction, which culminated in his kind of spiritual awakening in prison. But in his earlier years, he was a kind of energetic materialist in a way. But I think he did help the U.S. government with. I think he had some contact with Eisenhower to show how Cloudbusters could be used against UFOs. So that would have had, if the Nazis had some UFO type technology, the Cloudbuster could possibly be used against that. So I think Reich had some limited involvement in that, but probably only on a advisory level. He was too depressed in his last few years to really have been involved in any more way than that. He secretly met with President Eisenhower, I think, that when Eisenhower was holidaying in Maine, near Reich's laboratories, which I can't remember what year that would be, maybe 54 or 55, somewhere around that. So he certainly advised the US Air Force about using orgone as a kind of a technology that could power things like UFOs. And UFOs wobble if you point a cloudbuster at them. And there was a film produced that they made a B movie about it. I think it's called something like Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I reference it in there's an essay on Psych Orgone called Reich's Other Secret, and I think it is Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and it's quite a good like B movie from the 50s, but I think maybe after the meeting with Eisenhower, he might have mentioned it to someone, and they decided to make a movie about it, because that's based on a kind of cloud busting type device that makes UFOs wobble. That's the kind of central premise of the movie. And one of the characters in one of the scientist characters in the movie looks like Reich. So I think that they did that reference to him on purpose.
That's cute.
But yeah, it's fascinating what the Nazis were up to. Some people say the bell was a time machine, don't they? But because that's the other thing with Orinal, it affects time. If people are experimenting with Orinal, you have to be careful with psychics and shamans, because this is another illustration of how primary and secondary energies are different. Because shamans and psychics usually don't have electrosensitivity. They're usually not, like, you put a Wi-Fi router next to their head and they don't notice. But you put a shaman by the Orinal box for a week and they'll go crazy. Because the shamans and psychics already naturally have a high Orinal charge. So if you then boost it even further artificially, it takes them over their threshold. So, but that kind of like one shaman I knew used to say that the Orinal energy made her jump in time, or feel like she wasn't securely attached to the time stream we're in. I think time is a physical thing. So if you get a big enough concentration of time in one, a big enough concentration of Orinal, it changes time. So maybe that's what CERN's up to too, is with messing around with time streams. Sorry, go on.
Do a little bit of a controversy. I've always felt that time was emotional. And I think that is why they try to manipulate our emotions or try to harvest our emotions. But, like, for instance, if you're doing a squat, 5 seconds is a lot longer than when you're not. Mm-hmm. So that's why time is emotional. So, but yeah. Yeah,
that would fit in with the thesis of time being an energy or a physical thing, or because that's how Wright really discovered Orgone in the first place, is through emotions, because he realized there was a problem with people's ability to feel pleasure and pain, and Freud knew that as well. And Freud called it the libido, and the pleasure principle, but Reich thought it was a real energy, and so did Freud originally, but he then thought it was just psychic, and it was looking at the movement, because he found that in pleasure there's an increase of electrical charge at the skin, and in pain there's a decrease. So when the orgone goes from the skin to the core, when there's pain, there's a corresponding movement of electricity. So that it was looking at the blockages of emotions and how the flow of emotions is connected bioelectrically, that first led right towards Orgone. So the flow of emotion, if Orgone is identical with the flows of emotion, and it also is identical with the flow of consciousness, then emotions and time would be exactly interlinked, as you say.
Didn't the Ark of the Covenant also have some sort of manipulation over time? Wasn't that something?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Wasn't the Ark of the Covenant some sort of manipulator of time as well? Even when like when Moses had gone to go receive the tablets. Sorry, I'm getting a bunch of F-18s flying over me. Whenever Moses received the tablets, he had aged, or there was a manipulation in time.
He didn't age.
He didn't age, that's right, but he was gone for a while.
Yeah, because he go up into the mountain for like 40 days and nights, and that's a heck of a long time to be on a mountain.
It was something. That it was a manipulation in time, that it didn't agree with the natural course of it.
Yeah, that would make sense, because they often use symbolic language, like when they're describing things like the actual event. I mean, he might have been on the mountain for sort of a week and a half or a month and a half, but it would get described as 40 days, because 40 days is a generation period. So the Bible often uses symbolic language, but I don't think it's just symbols versus reality. I think there's some reality there, and they symbolize it to an extent. So, but when he went up, was it Moses or his successor who, when they created the golden calf while he was away?
I believe it was Moses, when he had gone up to receive the 10 Commandments. When he came back, and they had created a golden calf.
Because that must have been a long time. Because if they kind of abandoned their faith and practices, it must have been, maybe he was away for 6 months. I could well believe that there would be some kind of time field dilation, because you get that with there's a book called I always have trouble remembering the name of this book, and it's about was it by Randall's and Jenny Rand. Her first name was Jenny, and time, something like time, time balls or something like that, like these energy portals. It was definitely an Orgone energy, it seemed to me, when I read her book, and these concentrations of like Orgone seem to throw people into a different time dimension, or they go through these energy circles, and they'd be bounced into a different time, and they seem to have a lot of Orgone characteristics. I've listed them in one of my essays, and funny enough, it's really hard to get hold of this book now. Since I'd read it and quoted it, it's like sort of 60 quid to get a rare paperback of it.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's really, I think she's a UFO researcher. But anyway, there would be an association between time and strong oral fields. So
he was
I wouldn't be
days and 40
I wouldn't be at all surprised if Moses had traveled in time or been in a different time zone. Perhaps he was away for a year when he was up there, because they'd gone to, it must have taken time to abandon their faith in him and build their cow.
Right.
Which they.
It said that it was 40 days and 40 nights that Moses was gone.
Yeah, well, that they often use symbolic figures. So that like 40 is 40 weeks is the length of a pregnancy, and 40 years is considered a generation. So 40 days and 40 nights is considered a period of one thing changing into another. So it's like saying Moses went away for a period of a spiritual period of change. It may not actually mean 40 days as in a month and 10 days. I think the biblical stories are all founded in reality, but they people in that era they had an understanding of symbology, whereas people have lost that understanding now.
Yes.
So
they got it completely wrong. One of the two.
What's that?
We've
devolved in our understanding.
Yes.
I will say that usually that's the amount of time that you quarantine an animal when you're first into the fold. Yeah.
Oh,
well, I mean, you don't bring it into the fold first, but you quarantine him for 40. And like in Spanish, cuaresma or cuarenta is 40.
Mm-hmm.
And so you hold it at bay for 40 days, 40 nights to see if it comes down with anything. And then if it doesn't, then you bring it into the fold. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the figures and dates and things. You think, well, sort of, how could they have had an army of 250,000, or how I think that it's not necessarily exactly the figures aren't necessarily exact, but it's that they tell a story. So the story can still be true, even if parts of the story are symbolic. They make a subtle reference to monatomic gold with the story of the calf, because in one version of the events, in the Bible, they melt the calf down, and Moses makes the people eat it. And the only way you can eat gold is to transform it into monatomic gold, which I think also connects back into Egypt, because white gold would have been a thing in Egypt, I believe. But there is multiple stories about the calf. I think in another story it gets thrown into a river, but it's they hide things in the Bible, like they hide that the ark is activated by the priests, but they hint at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clever the way all the sort of it works on many different levels, and the symbology interacts with reality and stuff.
I mean, you got some wild adventures already, stories to tell about this stuff. That is crazy. You know what's funny? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Every time you've come on, I don't know if it has to do with that stuff, but I always have to turn off your background thing because you do get a hum. There's always a hum.
Really?
Yeah, I had to turn it on now. I meant to tell you that while you were going on in the show, but I was like, I'll bring it up later. I did find it interesting how you said that it supposedly gives off a hum, and when you came on, I had to reduce the background noise because it was a horrible hum. And that happens every time you come on, actually. I always have to do that.
Yeah, that
I wonder if
doesn't
the mic
surprise me.
is. You think the mic could be picking that up?
Yeah. Well, it's only just through there. The
Like,
the
I might be
energy
able
box.
to take it off, and actually people can hear it. I might be able to take it off for a second. Edit the mic seconds. Let me see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely
I'm
hear
about
it
12,
now.
12 foot from the energy box here.
Yeah, I can hear it now. Here, hold on one second. Yeah, now I shut it off. So people, I'm sure heard that now. The difference. Yeah, there's a hum, dude. Oh yeah, I'm gonna show it for Lisa. So, yeah. You remember before how he mentioned the humming, how he thinks that stuff hums, and I said to him, I said, I don't know if I've ever told him because I can just control the mic settings here. Some of them. Every time he comes on, I have to mute the background noise because there's a horrible hum. And I was wondering if somehow that's possible that it's picking that up. And watch, listen, you listen in now. It's quiet. I'm going to take it off.
Okay.
And I'm going to take it off now.
Yeah, it went off.
Definitely. There's definitely a hum. And I was like, yo, you think it's possible your mic's picking that up?
It sounds like when you flip on a switch for, something.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if you're too close to like, if my XLR cable was like maybe right against like an electrical thing, it might pick up something like that.
It's funny, Leon, because me and Nick had a conversation about TV, like back in the day when it used to be a TV set.
TVs, refrigerators, I think too.
You could hear a hum. Like you could be in another room in the house, and if somebody turned on the television, and back then, the TV wouldn't immediately come on. You wouldn't hear any sounds or anything. It just like clicked on, and you could hear the hum before the sound came forth.
I wonder if that's from the tubes.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they could have it all the way down, but if you were in another room and you were sensitive to it, you could hear the hum. Like it was like this high pitched, like white noise type. It wasn't even really a hum. It was like a white noise type.
I remember that.
Disturbance in the sound area that you could pick up.
Yeah, they were pretty high voltage things, weren't they? The TV sets.
Yeah.
Originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting to bring that up with that hum there, Leon. Might be here.
A lot.
Yeah. No, I noticed it as soon as again, every time he comes on, I did, but I just was like, oh, maybe it's his headset or something. But then when he talked about the Orgone humming, I was like, oh, jeez, okay, that's interesting. So,
I need to move to a church where I can have a stone area for the energy box, and I can live somewhere where I'm not getting too fried.
Yeah, who knows? But who knows what you might create if you put one of those things in a church long enough?
I know.
With the architecture, you never know.
True.
And with the metals in there, if you go to a nice fancy one, go to Catholic church.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the church organs are like a Cloudbuster in a way, and because they got the big metal pipes, and they're doing sound healing, and the church spires are like a pyramid, because the apparently spires are as effective as pyramid shapes, or cones are an effective energy condenser. I think some pyramid researchers have found that cones can be just as good. So yeah, and stone accumulates orgone charge. So, but it contains it as well, so it would be ideal for me, really. A stone church in the middle of the countryside somewhere.
Yeah, that'll probably work out well for you, sir. Leon, I think we're already over 2 hours. I felt bad. I know it was late for you because you're all the way over there. I'm so sorry I kept you up. It's probably like 11 o'clock.
Oh, it's okay. It's not too late. Yeah.
All right. But yeah, I think if you don't mind, we'll wrap it up here. I mean, that was some wild stuff that you talked about. Good luck to you, man. Living with that box in your house.
Yeah,
the odds be forever in your favor, bro.
Yeah.
I hope you come out of it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
It is a bit awkward sometimes sharing your life with an energy box. But,
yeah. Do you want to let everybody know where they can read your stuff again and wherever they can find some of your stuff?
Yeah. Well, my Substack is Orgone, ORGONE, and consciousness.substack.com, and my kind of week to week articles or my more informal articles are on there, and then the more formal stuff I've done is on the JPOT journal, which is an orgone journal that's run by a psychiatrist in the States, and that's at Psych Orgone, PSYCH Orgone, ORGONE. I think that's right. I'll just double check that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. PSYCHORGONE.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. I'll make sure I have those links in the bottom. Lisa, again, thank you for joining me. That was awesome. I loved all your input, questions, the things you brought up. That was awesome. Did you want to plug anything or yourself or?
Site of occultresearchinstitute.org, where Leon has some great, amazing read, and so do many other people, many of the contributors that have been on the show and that are contributed different topics and stuff like that. They have also contributed written content, and so
yeah, it's nicely organized site.
Oh.
Yes, thank you. I tried. We tried. We're trying our best with the time given. All right, so yeah, I'll leave your links in the bottom, Leon. Thank you very much for coming on again, man. That was always a really weird, interesting chat with you. I mean, in a good way. You know what I'm saying? It's always just like wild stuff. So, yeah, thanks again. We'll have to get you on in a few months from now and hear some more new wild and stories about Orgone.
Sure.
And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.